Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Sorotsky. I use he, him pronouns. I am a public health educator with the Washington Poison Center. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to day 2 of the Washington Poison Center's 6th annual overdose awareness series. No, I'm not going to keep you on, or I'm not going to take up too much of your time this morning. I just want to go through a little bit of some opening remarks before passing it on to my colleague Justin to introduce this morning's speaker. Let's see, we still have plenty of open seats, so please invite your friends, invite your acquaintances, invite your enemies if you want. The more the merrier. We'd love to see as many folks here as possible, both for the rest of today as well as the other 2 days of our series, August 19th and August 26th. For those who like this reminder too, those are both Tuesdays in the throughout the month of August, so every Tuesday this month. If you missed any of last Tuesday, we did record each session. We'll be posting those recordings as soon as we can, hopefully by the end of this week. If you missed anything you want to check out, we had a really great lineup. We had our opening keynote that reflected on the late Mary Selecki's legacy in Washington and in public health. We talked about crowd control chemical agents. We looked at lead poisoning in resource-limited areas in Washington state. We took a look at poisonous and hallucinogenic mushrooms, substance use disorders in older adults, gas station highs, and we wrapped that day up with a look at safer smoking supply distribution, a specific program in Spokane, Washington. Now, for those who have seen me do my little opening spiels or closing spiels at either this or previous overdose awareness series, you've heard me say this kind of thing before, that when we hear this term overdose, we often immediately think of the illicit, illegal substances, of criminality, enforcement, and these larger politics. And yes, those absolutely all connect to this term overdose, but this topic of overdose encompasses so much more. It includes perfectly legal medications and substances, stigma, media representation, harm reduction, marketing, trust, treatment, so much more beyond that. So with that in mind, you're going to see a rather different lineup today compared to last Tuesday and the other Tuesdays for this year's series. We're going to talk a lot about media in this particular session. We'll then follow up with a session on the Louisville quick response team, all about harm reduction approaches. We're going to focus, we'll have a session focusing on substance exposure specific to mortuary staff and embalmers, very niche topic there. We're going to look at some trends in the illicit drug market. We'll have updates from our friends at the Healthcare Authority and their Friends for Life campaign. We're going to then look at community pharmacy, medications for opioid use disorder. We'll have another media specific session all on social media toxic trends, and we'll wrap the day up on learning about GLP-1 receptor agonists in substance use disorders. That's the most clinical thing you'll hear me say today. All right, now one of the most powerful tools we like to encourage at the Washington Poison Center, at all poison centers, at really all aspects of public health, to help prevent and reduce harm from overdose is community building. So as we go through our sessions today, please keep an eye out for other attendees. Introduce yourself, look at the community tab in Whova specifically, see what discussions and groups are there, form a new one if you want, share resources, ask questions, look through the attendee list and see who you know, see who you don't know. And again, one of our goals with this series is to foster just another space where we can help support each other. Let me see, moving right along. I want to do a little plug for our new Mary Selecki Scholarship Fund at the Washington Poison Center. All proceeds given to this fund will help support future public health students who work with the Washington Poison Center. I personally really love this. Both myself and my colleague and friend Megan King actually started with the Washington Poison Center as public health students. And since we've had the privilege of supervising many public health students. And these projects are not just projects for the students, they're also helpful helpful projects and tools for the Poison Center, the Washington Poison Center. We've had community needs assessments. We've had curriculum development, training evaluation, internal quality evaluation and improvement, various research projects. We've had whole programs that we use as our part of our education and outreach that have started with students. All right, you've heard enough of me, so I'm going to pass things on to my colleague and Eastern Washington counterpart, Justin Mauger. Take it away, Justin.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Alex. Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin. I'm the community health educator for Central and Eastern Washington for the Washington Poison Center. Welcome back. It's nice to see everyone today. I'm glad to be able to host you. Quick housekeeping reminder, this series runs with new speakers and topics every Tuesday this month. We have tickets available still. So again, please don't hesitate to invite folks. Big thanks to our sponsors. We work for Health Washington, the Washington State Department of Health, Drug User Health Program, and Teen Health Hub, as well as the Washington State Healthcare Authority and the Friends for Life program. This is our first year with sponsors, so we appreciate them being early adopters. Additionally, as participants who are tuning in, you are muted, so please direct questions and comments to our chat box. There will be an interactive aspect of today's this presentation, navigating the media today, and so please do find the chat box and use it. It's my pleasure to introduce Mike McCormick. Mike is the Media Relations Education Coordinator with the Florida USVI Poison Information Center. Mike has more than 3 decades in the news, information, entertainment, digital, social, sports, and weather content creation. Mike was a news director for nearly 2 decades, leading to 6 different award-winning news operations. Mike also spent 5 years in a corporate role as a group news director, leading the marketing, digital and social content creation and news, weather, and sports programming at more than a dozen stations. Mike's been honored by many of the top journalism organizations with awards for newsroom excellence, investigative reporting, and documentary production. His awards include the National and Regional Edward R. Murrow Awards, Emmy Awards in multiple regions, AP Awards, and a prestigious Telly. Mike is also an adjunct professor of communications at the Flagler College in St. Augustine, Florida. Mike joined the Florida Poison Information Center in 2021. I've personally been really excited for this presentation today because I think navigating the news media around controversial topics is really, really important for us who work in public health and adjacently focused communities. Thank you again for sharing your time and expertise with us today on this topic, Mike, and I pass it over to you, please. Thank you.
Very kind words. Thank you very much, Justin. Just for everybody to know, I am coming from the USVI today. I am at the Red Cross in St. Croix, where we're actually on hurricane alert over here right now. Hurricane Erin making its way across. Hopefully the technology will hold out for the presentation. But with that, I'm going to get started.
Then in 1968, producer Don Hewitt recruited Harry Reasoner and Wallace to launch a new kind of television news program.
Good evening. This is 60 Minutes.
Where Wallace became master of the ambush interview.
How are you, sir? What is this? This is 60 Minutes. Wow. You're contemptible. I mean, that's not for the camera. I'd like you to get out of here.
There was no question he wouldn't ask.
How many people did you kill? 5. But I don't think I could kill an innocent person. It may just have been that you were difficult, Betty.
No.
Not difficult, impossible.
So Mike Wallace kind of set the stage for us in journalism, actually pre-Watergate, with the program 60 Minutes. And he kind of became the icon for a reporter that stood up for the little guy, that came in and asked the tough question. And he's obviously very famous for his ambush interviews through time. They used to say that you're having a bad day if you wake up and 60 Minutes is standing at your doorstep. It kind of defined journalism that led us into the Watergate area and obviously the great work of the Washington Post. And there was kind of a standard and a trust that went with journalism, that we could count on what was being said was truthful, that it was right, that in theory it was being produced without an agenda. And I'm going to circle back to that in a little bit. And that actually led to creating TV news stars. And as we progressed through the 1980s, you had people that were making salaries upwards of $20 million a year. TV news was cool. Being a reporter was an important job. And then the internet came. And unfortunately, that caused a big change in journalism as we know it today. And this chart right here, I think, is one of the easiest ways to show it. And this shows newspapers. I'm colorblind, so I can't tell you the colors, but the bar on the top, that was advertising for newspapers. And as you'll see, it exploded in billions of dollars, reaching almost $50 billion in advertising revenue. And the advertising was largely considered profit because that bar along the bottom, that was circulation. That paid for the trucks, the printing, the buying of the newsprint. But as you'll see, starting in about 1999, we had dips, and then it fell off a cliff that just dropped to now that advertising revenue is actually less than it is for the revenue of circulation. And that's a really big deal, and it kind of shows what's happening. And there's a similar trend going on in television right now. So today I want to start by painting a picture of the media landscape and what that really means for us as healthcare educators to be able to get our message out. I'm going to talk about some of the challenges with new media, and there are way too many to cover in this presentation. I'd be here for a week if I went over all of them, so I'm going to kind of cherry pick and talk about what some of those challenges are. But I always like to look at challenges as opportunities and how we can take advantage of these challenges to get our information out. And then lastly, I want to talk about strategies so that you can try to get your message out correctly and understand, some people would say best practices. I won't agree with that. I'm going to call these better practices because it is very hard to get the message out correctly with the way the media is set up today. You heard a little bit of introduction about me, so I won't spend much time on this, but just in case you're wondering who or how I know this stuff, again, more than 3 decades, that's me at World News Tonight, lots of awards. But this is the important thing to me now is that I'm now on the other side. The journalists would say I've come over to the dark side to be kind of a media, what they call a flack. But whether I'm in the top picture there on radio here in the Virgin Islands, or in the middle picture there on TV pretty regularly in Jacksonville, Florida, to podcast and radio, talking across the nation, I now have to go on the other side of the microphone. So hopefully I know a little bit about what I'm talking about here. But here's where we are. The news media is being decimated. Cuts are everywhere, and no news media is exempt from it right now. And as those cuts continue to happen, we're looking at that in just the last 2 years, we've lost nearly 35,000, almost 40,000 journalists, and those aren't being replaced. So there are less people with the title of journalist out there that are trained in ethics, trained in to identify their own biases, trained in how to present information. We have less and less of those out there. So if we went back to the time of 60 Minutes in its heyday and moved through the 80s, we used to have a mass media, and it was contained of a certain fraternity and sorority of people who got special education, who got special training, who had ongoing training to be able to bring news and information to you. But now we've gone from a mass media to a media of the masses. Quite honestly, anybody that has a cell phone can now be a, quote, journalist. No training is required, no ethics training. There is no contract to the truth. Anybody with access to the internet has the ability to create content nowadays. And because of that, we now have a very difficult time trying to figure out how we get correct information out there. Because again, you can have disinformation, misinformation, people who are intentionally trying to stir the pot, especially when it comes to health education. And I know all of you have seen this going back through some of what we dealt with in COVID and what we continue to deal with today. So I'd like to start out with an interactive part right now. So Justin, you can unmute if we can get some people to jump into the chat function. But I'd like to start with a real simple question because it seems like it ought to be simple. But what is news? How would you define what you would consider to be credible news? Who are the people that present that type of stuff? Justin, we got anybody that's willing to jump in?
Not Sometimes it takes a second. If folks look, the chat box is to the right of the presentation on your screen. It goes Q&A, polls, and chat. Oh, Megan Watson wrote, matters of public interest is a definition for news.
Okay, that's a good one.
Danielle writes current events.
Current events, okay. So I'll throw a second question in there. How do we get to decide what is an actual current event? And how do we decide what matters? Or who gets to decide that? I think it's probably a better question. Justin, you got your own thought on that one?
Yeah, I think probably whatever gets people to tune in and what sells, what advertisers will attach their name to in order to get the most out of their money. Like that would, I'm kind of cynical perhaps.
No, actually, you're jumping ahead in the presentation, but you're exactly on point for what this has become. There was a time where getting the story right and digging up the right thing, regardless of what it meant in terms of people watching, mattered. And because there were less places to get news, more people watched. But now that we've spread it all out, it's spread out who's doing it. So, if you were going to ask me, I would think people like the New York Times or ABC News, CNN, anybody like that would be considered news. But the reality is today, a lot of people consider podcasts news. I hear that all the time. Blogs. So anybody that can have an opinion used to be something that was separate from news. Now they've kind of blurred the lines that they've gone into it. And then the biggest thing is anything on social media. I used to sit behind glass and we would run focus groups with people when we were running the television stations. And we would always ask stuff. And I remember about 20 or so years ago, maybe not quite 20, maybe it was 15, we started hearing an answer when we would say, what is your news source? And people would say Facebook. And in the beginning, I was incredulous. I'm like, Facebook is not a news operation. But in time, I had to become to accept it, that because the reality is, your average TV station back then had 10 to 20 reporters. Facebook had millions of them that were out there covering things. Again, maybe not trained the same way, maybe not trained at all, but that's what it was. And what this has done is it's created a blurring of the lines. So again, like I said, 20, 30 years ago, what was set as news was one thing, an opinion or editorial was something else. But through time, we've seen those kind of mesh together, get blurred, where you can't always tell one from the other. This led to the rise, and this goes back almost 25 years into this term here, infotainment, which was the marriage of information, which a lot of times was not defined as news, that was seen somewhat separately, and entertainment, and bring those two together. And it created its own set of stars. Rush Limbaugh was one of the early ones on radio. And what's interesting is that if you ever read a Rush interview outside of when he was on the radio, he would tell you he was an entertainer. But when he was on the radio, one of the things he always stressed was the excellent in broadcasting network. You were only getting the truth. And this has led to some of the bigger TV talk show hosts we see today. I could probably throw Rachel Maddow from MSNBC just to bring a little balance to this picture right there. But, even when you talk to the people at Fox, they will tell you in their minds, they see a difference in their entertainment, infotainment programming, and their news programming. But I think for the viewers, what we've seen through time and what I've seen in studies is they see a blurring of the lines. And, that's led to it being something even different now, where you look at some of the top sources for news, whether it's Joe Rogan, or you get into the podcast, and true crime obviously is very important there. But Call Her Daddy got one of the presidential candidate interviews in the last round. Kamala Harris went on Call Her Daddy. So people that I wouldn't even considered a news source 15 years ago are now the ones that are out presenting this type of information. And that becomes very difficult for us, because before you had 3 or 4 television stations, a couple of national outlets, maybe a few radio, 1 to 2 newspapers. Now you virtually have millions of people that you're trying to keep tabs on, you're trying to feed information to, and you're trying to monitor for mis and disinformation. See if I can get this to play for you.
You having a blue check mark A Twitter handle and 300 words of cleverness doesn't make you a reporter. Being a reporter's hard, really hard. Like, I hate this damn debate about, like, oh, we don't need the media. Like, it is not true.
So that's the founder of Axios. He also wrote a great book, if you haven't read it, called Smart Brevity. I highly recommend it. But I'm going to disagree with Jim on the first half of his statement. While I agree with him, having a blue check mark should not qualify you to be a journalist. The reality is a lot of people do consider the people with blue check marks, and even some without them, to be journalists today. And when he says that's not what makes you a reporter is being hard, while I agree with him theoretically, being a reporter is hard. In practice, there are too many people that are out there putting out information. I remember at a time when we saw the demise of newspapers, I was in TV, and we could beat TV because we could be faster than them. But today, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram can all be faster than TV. As you see news stories breaking across the country, it can be citizens that can be showing us stuff with a lot of times not necessarily understanding the context and perspective of what they're actually showing us. And that's fueled the drive in social media. So now the people that you follow, a lot of times you consider, well, those are going to be trusted people, and you assume that the people you're following are doing their due diligence before they're sharing things. But if you actually think about it, you've probably been guilty of that before. You popped up, something looked interesting, and you hit share. This is kind of an insane example, but I remember on April 1st, however long ago that would have been, not this last April 1st, the one before it, I was flipping through Facebook, and I was a big fan of Yellowstone. And I got really excited when they announced there was going to be a 4th installment of it. It was going to star Matthew McConaughey. It's an actor that I like. And it was going to be set in space on the moon. And I was about to hit the share button when I went, okay, that is the most preposterous thing. And today is April 1st. Somebody is clearly playing an April Fool's joke. But people share information like that. People read it and people believe it. And this has led to me, an even worse situation now, where people become their own news editors. And so because of that, we've created echo chambers where people will select news that already matches what they think. And so it becomes easy for them to believe it. In the past, you had journalists that kind of pre-selected, and obviously there's problems with that. But now for people to select their own, and they can only pick stuff from maybe one side or the other. So we've got the blue media and the red media, and people that listen to red media don't believe blue, and people that listen to blue media don't believe red. So it becomes very difficult for us to get traditional information out there. The traditional media is dying, and that's unfortunate. Now, it's still the biggest category, but it's a much smaller category today than it used to be. And what this has led to is an incredible brain drain, where some of the best and brightest reporters, they're all getting out of the business and going into things like being media relations or doing other things. And the people that are coming up into media now tend to be younger and younger and younger.
And apparently, I've never been on live television before, but apparently sometimes I don't watch I don't watch the news because I'm a kid, and apparently Grandpa just gives me a remote after we watch the Powerball.
That's it, the Powerball. Okay, that's not obviously a reporter, but for a lot of us that used to be in the industry, that's what we see when we see the young reporters today. And that's very disturbing because they lack life experience. They lack the experience of a lot of the audience that we're trying to talk to on a regular basis. So a lot of times they won't understand the importance of what we're trying to talk about. Additionally, journalists are stretched more than ever. They're required to do more stories, to try to be in more places, but they have the same amount of time to accomplish this. This can be a positive because if you understand that journalists are stretched, we can do some of the work for them. And so 15, 20 years ago, a journalist was unlikely to take research and stuff from us. They'd want to do that on their own. Today, they're very thankful when you can hand them research because it's work and time they get back so that they can put stories together. All right, before I get to strategies, the last thing I want to cover here is bias. because that was kind of the genesis of this series when Megan King originally called me and asked if I was willing to talk about it, was for some stories that were done on a poison center that kind of got off the rails from what the poison center wanted to talk about. Here's the thing. All reporters are biased, and they always have been. The difference was, you go back many years ago, most of the people tried to check their biases or at least be aware of their biases when they were doing it or doing reporting. Whereas today, some people use those biases to actually fuel their reporting. And, you know, we see this right now. I think if I asked most of you to vote right now, you would tell me MSNBC is on the left and Fox News Channel is on the right. And I think it kind of feels that way when you look at the editorial tone of what they are doing. And MSNBC continues to run more left. Fox continues to come more right. And that leaves it so somebody like CNN that's trying to stay in the middle, they're actually losing viewers. Because again, those echo chambers, people are funneling off to go into those areas. So CNN has dropped to third place in the national cable races. Now, look, bias in media, that's not anything new. I can go back to pre-1900. If you're a student of history, you might remember the battle cry, "Remember the Maine." This is a period they called yellow journalism, where you had some very rich people who could own newspapers, who could kind of inject their points of view into reporting. And this involves a ship blowing up in Cuba that led to some armed conflict back then, if you're not a student of history. The reality is today, it doesn't require just rich people that own newspapers. Again, anybody that can own a cell phone or own a computer has the ability to inject their own bias. And you know what? Everybody is biased. So just keep that in mind as you go forward. So where are we now? Traditional media is smaller and the people doing it are less experienced. Non-traditional media, and again, that's blogs, that's podcasts, websites that people are throwing up, is growing at an exponential pace. Journalism, I guess I should say that journalism, it has become a big question mark. You know, who you can trust now is becoming more difficult, and it requires more work on the viewer or user's part to check what is being given to them. You can't take anything at face value anymore. There was actually a study done at Stanford where they call it vertical reading and horizontal reading. Vertical reading, think about your feed and going down your feed. And when you find something that you think is interesting, you then need to go to the right and to the left of it to get more information before you make a decision on it. A lot of journalism today, as Justin so eloquently put earlier, is click-driven decision-making. They are trying to find things that will actually require viewers, users, readers to interact with the content that is out there. They actually can measure down to what type of topics, what types of words, what type of people actually drive people to watch. And since people watching, eyeballs is what journalism is selling. They need eyeballs to put advertising in front of them. The more eyeballs you have, the more valuable your advertising is. It's also led to, because of this, what I would call kind of faux accountability. So you have a lot of TV stations out there that are trying to do a type of journalism where they can really kind of run in and pretend to be like Mike Wallace and knocking people down to find the bad guys and present the bad guys to us. 60 Minutes only works on a few stories a year. They only present 3 a week, and they're only on for about 30 weeks a year. So you're probably talking less than 100 stories. Most journalists will do 100 stories in a month today. They can't have the type of background into their stories and research that you would see on a 60 Minutes. So what are we going to do now? Well, we could do this and just be an ostrich and stick our head in the sand, or maybe we could actually stick our head in the sand. But I really don't want you to do that, because the less we want to interact with the media and the people that are out there, the more that it opens up space for other people to fill it with information that we may not agree with or may not be accurate. And so it's going to require an entirely new playbook for us and what we want to do and how you deal with reporters going forward. And so I like to break the playbook down into 3 sections. So if you've got an interview coming up, I want to focus on the before. And what are you going to do to try to control the narrative that comes out for the story that you're involved in? And then I want to talk about during interviews, what you can do to try to manage the reporters who can bring bias into everything from their questions, and how you can work to stay on message no matter what the reporters throw at you. And then importantly, following up and what you can do in the period from when a reporter leaves you before they go to air to continue to work that story so that you get something that you will be happy with, and then what you need to do when they get it wrong to do it. So we'll start with before and kind of controlling the narrative. And this is one of the most important things. And I think that we need to think of two things, and it starts with the word motivation. So when a reporter calls us and asks us about a certain topic, we need to think of what is our motivation for wanting to be part of this story, and what are the things that we want to get out in the story. I think more important, you need to think about what is the reason that a reporter called and asked about a story. What is their motivation for doing this story? What are they trying to get out of it? I had a reporter that called back in April that said their sales department came to them, and the people that owned one of the companies that is putting out the THC drinks had called their advertising department and said, you should do a story on these because these drinks are wonderful. And so the sales department said, you should come do a story on these great new THC drinks and how wonderful they are. And luckily, when the reporter called, this was somebody that is still a journalist, and they said, you know, we need to make sure we've got both sides. And I said, well, we definitely have some information we need to add to this before you decide whether these drinks are wonderful.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
You know, we would hope, I
answers?
think, in motivation would be the truth. But the reality is that's not the motivation very much anymore when we are seeing it. Again, their motivation is to get people to watch. The reality is that there is a bias a lot of times for reporters. Their bias is they want drama. Their bias is in a story, they want conflict. Their bias is they want controversy, because those are the things that engage an audience and make an audience want to get involved and to watch stories. I call this black hat and white hat journalism. So you probably have to be of a certain age, like me approaching 60, where you can go back to the old day of all the Westerns. And in the Westerns, the good guys always wore the white hats, and the bad guys in the Westerns always wore the black hats. So a lot of journalists today have taken what was kind of a well-researched idea of where they should go, but they don't have the experience to really know how to execute it. So white hat and black hat journalism to them becomes really simply, they decide before a story who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. What you don't want to do is end up being the one who is wearing the black hat in that type of situation. Number two on controlling the narrative is feed the beast. So one of the things I think you need to do on a regular basis is you need to be feeding reporters stories that you want done, and do this on a very regular basis, because reporters are kind of like a good dog, and a good dog understands you don't bite the hand that feeds you. So if you're only sitting back and waiting for a couple of times a year for a reporter to call and say they want to comment on something, then that reporter doesn't really know you from Adam. And so because they don't do that, they're likely to go in any direction. If you're on a first name basis, if you have a relationship with reporters, they are less likely to want to come after you. Now, again, this is not foolproof because reporters are still reporters, and occasionally even good dogs bite. But the more that you can feed reporters story, help them get through their days, the more likely they are to help you. 3, investigate. You got a new reporter that comes up. If you're new to a market, get online and study up on the reporters. See what you can find out about them. Are there anything you can find from some of their past stories that potentially show you biases of where they want to go? What can you find out about the organization that owns the operation that you're talking to? Is it a liberal-based people that own it? Is it conservative-based people that own it? This will all things that will help you prepare. And again, ask questions of the reporter. So what's this story about you want to ask me about? Well, what kind of things do you want to ask me about? Very seldom, at least with good reporters, will they give you the actual questions they're going to want to ask. But if you will spend some time kind of picking their brain, you can figure it out. You can also email them and see if they'll send you something in writing. Go on Google and just Google around and see if you can figure out what was their motivation to get into the story. We're going to be doing a story on Thursday involving vaping. And just with a couple of quick Google searches, I found some articles about counterfeit Chinese vapes. So I know that's the motivation and where they're trying to go beyond just saying we want to talk to you about vaping. Point number 4 is talking points. And this is one of the most important. Before you go into any interview, don't just think you can sit down and wing it. And I don't care if you're very good at this. Don't just go in there and sit down and think you can wing it, because that's where a reporter can get you off base and saying something you don't want to say. One of the things that can help you is using AI. You can ask AI, what are good talking points on a topic? It might bring them up. You can change the query around different ways. Talk to people in your office. Sit down and think about, what the research is showing and come up with about 3 to 5 points. And I would keep it that simple that no matter what you get asked, you are going to refer back to those 3 to 5 points. And lastly, this is one of the most important things. I would say practice. Get somebody else to play the part of the reporter and ask you questions so you can work on making sure that you are getting your talking points across in a way that is coherent when you're doing it. And second, I would say practice. Practice, practice, practice. That's the way that you can make sure you get to where you want to be. And again, other people in your poison center, in your health organization can be helpful. Get them to come up with their own ideas of what they think would be it. Another thing you can do is ask ChatGPT to ask you some questions. Put the query in, be a biased reporter asking me questions about this. What would that look like? And it will bring some stuff up that you could sit down to look at. And again, you can't be prepared for every eventuality, but if you've got those 3 to 5 really good talking points and you've practiced getting to those talking points, no matter what gets asked, you can always move to it. And it won't catch you like a deer in the headlights when the reporters are asking questions. So here's some common interview traps. And the problem is if you fall into one of these, a lot of times you can end up making yourself go viral. And I promise you this, if 30 years ago you didn't want to have 60 Minutes show up on your doorstep, today you don't want to be made a meme. So number 1, don't fall into the trap of trusting the reporter. I don't care how nice they are to you. I don't care what they say. It is a trap, because at some point they're going to go back and put the story together. Don't try to please the reporter, because again, at the end of the day, their allegiance is to the story that they are doing. Talking too much a lot of times is a trap. And one of the things that reporters are trained to do, the good ones at least, is to shut up, because a lot of times that makes us more likely to try to fill the space. You want to stay to your talking points so that you're only getting that information out there. And lastly, and this is a big one, sometimes you'll get asked something from left field that maybe you don't know, so you'll just try to dig through your brain to come up to it. Answering what you don't know can get you in trouble very, very quickly. All right, pivot. This is one of the most important topics. You read up on it today. I think the new term is bridging, but I kind of like pivoting. So if you think about it like a basketball player that plays down near the hoop, and they used to talk about pivot, where they leave one foot on the floor and then they can spin around and pivot. You want to do the same thing with any question that gets asked. So what you want to do is, no matter where the question goes, be able to take it and pivot back to your talking points. And I can give some examples of that as we go through it. But if a reporter came and asked a question about, on vaping, can you tell me about the dangers of, Chinese vapes that have not been inspected by the FDA? And I could say, the FDA is the official organization when it comes to counterfeit or not. But what I can tell you, that's my pivot, is that at poison centers, we get X number of calls involving vapes, that children of this age are involved in it. So you take it and you pivot it back to your talking point of what you want to say. So you get back to your talking points. That is the big key. Stay in your lane. Again, it gets really easy for them to ask a question that involves another agency. This is one of my favorite things when I get asked a question like that, and I could say, you know what, that's an excellent question, and you ought to talk to the local police about this. But, and again, that's when I'm then going to pivot and go back to what I want to talk about in doing that. Reporters love if you're not playing their game the way they want to then try to get you to speculate. Well, you know, what would you speculate is the reason why this is happening? You know what, the bottom line is just don't play that game. Don't do it. Don't speculate. Because again, you can be edited and taken out of context in what you're saying on that very, very quickly. What I like to do is say, you know what, I'm not going to speculate on this, but here's what I do know. And then again, I can go through exactly stuff that I know is evidence-based and well-researched to get through it. And typically that's going to be pivoting back to the talking points. If you watch really good politicians, they are masters at always being able to go back and get to the message of what they want to do. The key is always being ready to pivot off of what's being said. Loaded questions. And you know, this becomes hard when you're sitting down now because you need to be looking for logical fallacies or little landmines that reporters are throwing in when they're asking their questions. So when you look at something like a question like this that would be loaded, isn't it unfair to local businesses to impose yet another environmental regulation that will drive up businesses' costs? And you know what I would say to that is to answer it by using the same word that they did. So unfair is kind of the loaded word in here. What would be unfair is asking taxpayers to pick up the tab for the small number of businesses who are affected by this regulation. And you could even play off that. What would be more fair is to have the people that are using it pay for it. So you've got to be listening. Don't be too quick to jump and answer a question so that you can also kind of be hearing their motivations, loaded questions, logical fallacies as they are being asked. Don't jump in and feel like you have to answer the second the person is done talking. Pause, think, and then speak. And here's another really good example of what you can do, which is push back on the reporters when they ask some of these kind of unfair questions.
Why are you asking taxpayers to put a $5,000 expense for party supplies? Shouldn't that money be spent on crucial programs and services elsewhere? So this is one of those cases where you can very easily see somebody sputtering and very anxious. But here's how I'd like to see that person answer the question. $5,000 couldn't possibly be a better investment. What that program you're referring to is at-risk youth who formerly went through the program are mentoring at-risk youth in our community today. As a result of this program, people in our community that for too long have been forgotten or left behind have a better chance of completing high school, a better chance of going to college, a better chance of getting high-paying jobs for the rest of their lives. And when you see what happens in that room when we acknowledge the tremendous strides those young people have made, you probably would look at it and say $5,000 isn't enough. You should be spending more to acknowledge what they did. So that's why we're spending that money, and I would invite members of the community to participate in this program and witness for themselves why this is such a great use of taxpayer funds. You can see in that moment how the story completely flips, because rather than defending for a second, you instantly grabbed the accusation and turned it on its head.
So that's the president of Throughline. He used to work at ABC World News Tonight with Ted Koppel. And what I like about this, when I say pushback, I don't mean in the way that you see some politicians today where they call reporters stupid or fake or anything like that. What I mean in the pushback here is the question gets asked in such a way to put you on the defensive, but instead of being defensive, it's responding big with positivity and turning that argument like he did there. It's not a waste of $5,000 for the taxpayers. This is actually not enough money being spent by the taxpayers to make our society better. And it really changes and reframes what's being done. Remember, body language says a lot, and that we communicate a lot in what people see when we are talking. So one of the things you've got to do is never let them see you sweat when you're being asked a question. Little tics or dropping your lips or losing the color in your face. You want to stand there and keep that big smile on your face and just talk in a nice, friendly, warm manner as you talk to the people. You know, and if you have to, and you can even at times say, you know what, if you're going to keep cutting me off, I can't get to this. But if you will give me the opportunity, what I'd like to do is explain. And that really turns it back on the other person, and it keeps you looking like the good guy and not the bad guy. Sometimes it's the actual question the reporters are asking that they're going to use, and they're not even going to use your answer.
Secret slush funds, laundering money in Mexico, payoffs to silence witnesses, perjury, conspiracy to obstruct justice. All of this by the law and order administration of Richard Nixon.
Is there a question in there somewhere? The best question that Mike ever asked, which is not a question.
Yeah, so it's a trick by reporters. You need to be on the lookout for it. A lot of times they will say stuff, and you'll see reporters more and more miking themselves now so that they can hear themselves talk. So you've got to be ready so that you can respond to something if it's a non-question to get you back to your talking points. Follow up. So this gets us to the last category here. So when you're done with the reporters and they go out the door, you know, one of the first things I would do is always send them a quick email. Thanks for coming by today. If you have any questions, here's my cell, here's my email, tweet me, whatever you need to do to make sure that that you're there. A lot of times in the interview, I'll hear them asking for certain things, which will spur things in me. So sometimes I'll actually go back and do research and send them on. You seem very interested in this part of the story, so here's some research, stuff that will help expand our narrative for what we're doing. If what they end up reporting is incorrect, I tell you, you've got to push back. You need to call the reporter and try to have a conversation. If that doesn't work, get to the editors or news directors above them, but be prepared to make a compelling case when you go. One thing I would tell you is don't get tripped up if they're minor mistakes. Try to really hold those reasons to go after them for stuff that really matters. So if the reporter says there's only one kind of anti-venom to treat snake bites by pit vipers, and we know there's actually two, to the audience, anti-venom is anti-venom is anti-venom. I wouldn't get all bent out of shape over something like that. But if it's a major mistake that they make sure that you do get in there and push back. You know, and lastly, you have to watch and read anytime you get interviewed so that you can stay vigilant and be the cop to make sure that you are policing the truth. So kind of the big takeaways that I want you to remember is all media is biased. They always have been, but today it's even more so because the definition of media has expanded so broadly. But the biggest bias they have is a bias against boring. So we need to remember that because that can be a positive for us. So as we are preparing our talking points and to get our story out, we better not be bored. We better not get down in the weeds, because that kind of stuff is either going to get cut out of stories or potentially turned against us. The other bias that they have is towards cheap, easy, and visual. Because again, there's less of the traditional media today. They are stretched more. So the more that we can make it easy for them to do a story, the more that we can help provide them. A lot of times when reporters are coming, I will set stuff up so they will have stuff to shoot when they get there, because they'll need their B-roll to go with their stories. I will create charts or whatever I need to do so that we can give them something visual to make it easier to do. Ultimately, remember this: the media doesn't care about you. They may seem like they do, and I may sound very cynical, and you could say as a recovering media person, maybe I have some sort of bias. And again, go to the top point: all media is biased, all people are biased. So I probably do carry some bias, but they really don't care about you. They care about getting their story. And if you spend a lot of time in newsrooms, you'll hear reporters talk about it. They always say it's my story, and that's what they're always trying to get it out there. So don't be fooled to think that just because they like you, they're going to take care of you. Don't lose your cool. They're trying to provoke you. So don't do that, because I guarantee you that will be used and it can go viral in a way that you don't want it to. And ultimately, remember this: their job is to ask tough questions. Our job is to answer them. So they may ask questions we don't like, and that's okay. That's their prerogative. We need to be prepared to answer them, because if we don't answer them, who is going to provide the answer to those questions? You know, from all of this, I could see you taking away and saying, you know what, Mike, with podcasters and bloggers and 12-year-old reporters, it's just easier just to say, no, we're not going to do interviews. We're just not going to do it, because when we do them, we get burned, they get stuff wrong. We just don't feel it looks good for us. And I'm really going to ask you, please don't do that. We need to fight truth decay. And that's what's happening in this country right now, is other people are popping up to be experts and speak in a space that should be ours. And a lot of times they are giving out information that we don't want to do. You know what? We've got to be the defenders of democracy. So you know what? I want you on that wall. I need you on that wall so that we can be defending the truth and making sure that we are getting information out to the people. With that, I am Justin. I am glad to open it up to some questions, or if somebody's got some specific scenarios, if anybody is still watching besides you and Alex, that'd be awesome too.
Oh yeah, there's quite a few people. The chat's actually been pretty active too. I think there was a little delay in some of the previous answers, but we had some comments kind of, you know, the dumbing down of America can be feel I think folks feel that sometimes when they're watching the news on different sources, that it's kind of difficult to with
So I
so
like
many
to say,
different
don't dumb it. Yeah, don't dumb it down. And you hear that a lot. We got to make it, dumb it down and go to a 5th grade level and all that. I don't agree with that. But we don't need to do is intellectualize it up. This isn't a contest on how many big words we can use or getting into complicated. We need to make it easy to understand. And one of the problems with the electronic media, and to some extent with the speed that we read social media today, is people don't take the time to go back, or especially if it's in an audio form, they can't go back. So we have to make sure that we get it to them one time. And the problem is we're a distracted society. When I first was becoming a news director, we used to talk about second screen viewing, which meant while people were watching television, they were using a second screen. And at one point I went to my bosses and I said, we have it wrong. It's while people are using their devices that the television has become the second screen and become the background. So a lot of times when if you're on the 6 o'clock news, people may be at home cooking while you're trying to get that information out there. So if you make it too complicated, people will not hear it correctly and communication won't happen.
So as we wait for questions from the group here, I had a couple questions. I think some of these you kind of might have answered, but maybe you can explain further if you so choose. I get the impression that not all publicity is good publicity. Would you agree with that or disagree?
You know, that's a tough one, you know, because I do kind of live with a P.T. Barnum philosophy that that as long as they get our name out there, it can be helpful. But no, obviously there is times that you can have bad publicity. And I think it's worse today because it can get spread on the internet. And as it gets handed down, almost like that old game of telephone, a lot of times that can turn and get worse and worse and worse. So yes, there are times that publicity can be bad for you. But I would hate that to be the thing to keep you or shy you away from doing interviews.
Great. We have a comment, just we're here. We appreciate you. Really fun talk, full of great advice. Thank you. Stay safe in St. Croix. I had another question. How much... I think the challenge I would have is that fear of wearing that black hat, right? Like accidentally stumbling into a situation where we find ourselves in the black hat. How worried about that should we be? Will it, like in this like, you know, the 24-hour news cycle now, the newspapers have different stories every day, right? Will it just fizzle out or haunt us forever? And I assume there's some, you know, depends on what it is, right? But just I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I would just say the answer is yes to your question. But for the most part, stuff can get out of the cycle. But what you do run into now in one kind of journalism that goes by different names, accountability journalism, problem-solving journalism, the journalist will come to you with something. And if you get painted in the bad light in it, they're going to stay on it for several days and bleed that for as much as they can going forward. there can be a time that you finally just have to say, well, that's it. We're not going to play anymore, and see that drop out. It's probably, beyond one volley or two volleys, not worth going for a third volley with a reporter, because if they're biased and they're stuck on something, they're going to go down. My bigger thing would be, don't be afraid of being in the black hat. Be aware that that's a potential. And so what can we do to keep from being in the black hat? One of them that I think we've been guilty of in healthcare messaging for years is talking in absolutes. And I was on a call nationally with NIPIC, and they were talking about it. One of their new things that they were saying that's really important, they were doing vaccine safety, is to say, don't be out there and say vaccines can't hurt people. Because even if there's a 0.1% chance, that's all the people that are on the other side need to be able to throw back as some sort of fact against what you're saying to paint you. So try to not talk in absolutes, but try to talk in maybe best practices or better practices of things that's going on. 99% of the people, this isn't going to be a problem. So 1% it could be. Well, yes, but get our automobile every day. We have a chance of getting in a car crash. So just work to not get yourself painted into a thing where you become the bad guy. We're just providing the information.
Gotcha. And then Rebecca had a question in the chat. How do you suggest navigating non-questions in real time?
Non-questions in real time, a lot of times, is to just turn around and say, so what exactly is your question? When they come up with that overall statement, and to throw it back on them, so they're going to have to say something back to you. So don't take the bait and try to jump off of what they're saying. What specifically are you trying to ask me or learn from me when you with that statement you just made? And again, a lot of times they're saying it just to hear themselves speak, so that they can then take that and drop that in their story.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. There's one more comment. This was and I think a good place to leave it probably. This was such powerful information. Pivot, be positive. And on those questions of not knowing, I hear many times, great question. I'll have to get more information and get back to you, or I need more thinking time, cliffhanger responses. But Mike, thank you so much for your expertise today and sharing this. I think it's something that it's oftentimes outside the world of what I find myself researching in my job, but it's absolutely like crucial information for all of us that work, whether it's at a poison center or at a public health agency, to stay focused on. So thank you so much for sharing with us. Folks, please stay tuned. We have Am I Going to Die Doing My Job next? And at the same time, the Louisville Quick Response Team about compassionate overdose response. So did you have any closing thoughts for us, Mike?
No, I thank you very much for being on there. You can always reach out to me. I'm at the Florida USVI Poison Center. I'm in the directories if you need to reach out if you have questions. Love to hear if you have situations, because I'm always trying to learn on this also. It is evolving. So let's just keep going. But I think it's really important that we don't shy away from it, because if we're not answering the question specifically to our field on poison, who's going to be answering those? And that's what keeps me awake at night. But Justin, Alex, Megan, all of you, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you too. Appreciate it. Bye now.